everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us this evening. Just waiting about 30 more seconds to allow our participants to log in and get set. Please, as you're joining us, we ask that you mute yourself and remain muted for your audio throughout the presentation. We have 3 wonderful panelists joining us, and we think that if everyone can remain on mute, aside from our panelists, that will make sure that we have minimal distractions. You will have an opportunity to send in questions and comments in the chat if you would like, so please remain muted and use the chat in order to communicate during tonight's presentation. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Job Search Strategies Career Panel, a professional development webinar presented by the Office of Career Services at CUNY School of Professional Studies. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. I think we are all in for a treat. We will go ahead and get things moving after a very quick introduction. Right now, I just wanted to mention that we will be providing a link to the recording as well as the slides from our webinar to attendees following the webinar. We also are offering live captions during the session. Thank you to our captioner who is joining us. If that is something you would like to take advantage of, please do so. We will begin things by hearing from each of our 3 panelists this evening. They'll provide you with their own career stories, their pitch, if you will. Then we'll go through some pre-planned questions that I think all of us will enjoy discussing and learning about. Then we'll move into taking some of the questions from our audience attendees. And we'll round out our session with some closing remarks from our panelists. And I will let you know about a couple of programs that we have coming up. So my name is Shannon Gallo. I'm the Manager of Career Services here at CUNY SPS. I'm really excited about the career panel that we've put together for all of you this evening. As we were preparing to begin, one of our panelists had said that we have a nice mix of people with lots of different experiences and backgrounds to share with you, and I agree completely. So I think we're really in for a treat. Tonight we will hear from 3 featured panelists. The first of those, Ed Alvarez. He is a CUNY SPS alum. The second of those, Beth Sabota. She has an MA in Art and Media from NYU and a BA in Television and Film from Syracuse. And third, we have Brian Clough, who is also a CUNY SPS alum from the business program. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to our first panelist, Ed, to share his career story and tell you all a little about himself. Ed, take it away.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Hi, everybody. My name is Eduardo Alvarez, or Ed for short. I am a CUNY SPS alumni, having graduated in December 2022, I believe, with my master's in industrial organizational psychology. I did get my bachelor's from the SUNY College of Old Westbury, which I believe is SUNY University of Old Westbury now. I was previously working as a senior manager talent acquisition at Media Brands. Prior to that, I was over as more in the recruitment space as well, over at Omnicon Health Group. I have about 5 years of experience now in HR, with specifically TA, talent acquisition, expertise and experience.
Thank you, Ed. It's great to hear from you. Looking forward to hearing more later. And I'm excited to hear from you as both your experiences as a student, as an HR and recruitment professional. Really excited to have you with us. So thank you. Okay, now I will turn things over to our second panelist. Beth, take it away.
Thanks, Shannon. Hi, everyone. It's nice to be here. I am one of the non-SPS people on the panel. I'm an independent HR consultant that's working in the New York City area, predominantly working with nonprofits, although I also do work with a few clients that are beyond New York City and possibly some that are even for-profit. But over the last 5 years, I've really been focusing on the nonprofit space. Before that, I was working in various different industries, working in HR for real estate developers. Before that, in arts and media. So I have a little bit of a career change in my own history, like I've heard some of you have. What I do now is very much an HR generalist perspective. So my HR experience runs the gamut, but recruiting makes up a really big part of it. So I'm excited to talk about that tonight. I've been doing recruiting probably for at least the past 15 years. So I have some good things to share, hopefully. And I'm excited to hear from, the other panelists and everyone's questions that are attending as well.
Thank you, Beth. We appreciate you being here with us. I think you'll probably, through the questions and discussion, you'll learn a little bit about CUNY SPS yourself. So thank you again for being here. Now we will move into our third panelist for this evening, Brian Clough. Brian, take it away.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian. I'll go in reverse order, and I'll say that I started with retail. And I was in clothing for a long time. I was a sales associate there until I decided to take a chance on startups. I have plenty to share about the startup world, both the bootstrapping and the finance startup world. Basically specialized in tailoring until recently I transitioned into the banking industry. I'm currently a financial center manager at Bank of America.
Thank you, Brian. It's nice to have you here as well. I will share that I met Brian initially because he was very proactive with his career change and his job search. And he reached out to my office and said, hey, I need some help. I'm trying to make this transition. And I understand that career service is a place to go. So I'm happy that it's come full circle for you, Brian, and appreciate you being here with us this evening. So thank you, all three of you. I will go ahead and move into, I will go ahead and move into the questions that we've already prepared for this evening. Okay, so to go ahead and start things off, I'll go ahead and sort of throw out a pretty, what I would say is a pretty general question. And I'll go ahead and start with Beth on this one, and then move to Ed, and finally Brian. What would you say are some of the most important competencies or human skills, I will say? Many people call them soft skills, but I attended a conference recently and the speakers were using the word human skills in place of soft skills. And I really like that idea. So I'd love to hear from you first, Beth. What do you think are some of the most important human skills that are really valued by employers in today's market?
Sure. That's a great question. I think one of the biggest things, and it's probably something that many of you would answer as well, but communication, people skills, just being able to relate to others in a very human way. I think we all forget, we're at work. We are sometimes, unfortunately, maybe the expectation is that we're putting out a lot of work and, machine-like fashion, but we are all humans. So I think it's really important to remember that and be able to somehow produce like a machine at the same time. But communication and how you're interacting with your colleagues and perhaps your clients, your customers, however any stakeholders in your environment. I think that is the most important thing, being able to express yourself clearly, succinctly, hopefully, with compassion at all times. I think that is something that is one of the biggest skills and biggest values that everyone should try and uphold. So that, and I will pass it over. I forget who goes next. Is that Ed next?
Yeah, let's hear from Ed next. What do you think are some of those most important human skills?
I'm in agreement. Communication is very important. It's definitely important for anything team oriented. Just communicating with the teams, your managers, letting them know what's going on your end or any projects you might be working on. But also just to, provide a different answer, I would say flexibility is another big one I've seen, and just from my personal experience as well. The landscape for work is forever changing, whether it's technology or the pandemic. Just being able to kind of just pivot and just adjust to any new responsibilities that may come your way, any new roles, any new tasks that may come throughout the day-to-day. Teams really do appreciate somebody that's very flexible and also team oriented.
Thank you, Ed. Brian, what would you like to add to what Beth and Ed have already told us?
Well, in agreement, communication is huge. Empathy is a major thing for me, especially when I have to be, I guess, empathy, but as well as self-awareness, how you carry yourself and how you hold your stress or how you go throughout your day. People are watching you. And that's a big thing to know, especially in your work, is that you need to be self-aware of how you're carrying yourself, how you're interacting with people. And then in that situation, you're able to approach things in a fresh way with the people, as opposed to them have a preconceived notion of, oh, you may be too stressed, so I'm not going to approach you today, or giving off that sort of energy of, I'm so stressed, I'm going to wear it on my sleeves, as opposed to, it's my job to keep, to do what I agreed to do when I was hired. And it's my job to make sure that you are successful as well. So in order to be truly empathetic, you have to be self-aware of what's going on with your life, set it aside, and then really get into the interaction that you're having with someone else.
I like it. That's a great point. Thank you all. I think it's good that we're getting started with some of this. One of the things that I hear somewhat frequently from our students and alumni when we're talking about careers is that those kinds of things are, sometimes difficult to highlight, because it's not like you can say on a resume and really add credibility on a resume that you have empathy, or that you have flexibility and the adaptability and those kinds of things. But I think some of those human skills are some of the most important things when you're trying to make a career transition. So that will be my next question. Let me go back to Brian. What do you think are some of the best ways? What pointers do you have for someone who's looking to highlight their transferable skills, whether it's those human skills or maybe some other types of skills that they're trying to use to transfer from one career to a different career?
Knowing what you know is, first of all, having the confidence in that. But when making a change to a different industry, a different career, or whatever you're doing, it's important to actually go through and do your research. Find out, again, like one of the biggest things that I worked with Shannon and such was, use your skills, you're good at delivering certain things, but also be smarter than the person that's about to interview you. And the fact that go do some research. Do they call them clients or do they call them customers? Like they especially at a corporate level, they're very meticulous about the words that they use. And so in doing your research and stuff like that, you really can show that you are adaptable, you do prepare ahead of time, like you'll capture the people's attention. And that really helped me with my most recent interview process, was that I was already speaking to what they wanted to teach me starting day one. And then I was able to, once you get them kind of to soften up, you kind of can get in a little bit more control of the sharing of what you can do. It's like, you've already proven that you're willing to go above and beyond. Now let's talk about what I can deliver for you and value proposition.
You've got it right. Thank you, Brian. Beth, what would you like to add to what he said?
I think those are really, really good points, Brian. And I think you may have kind of touched on this already, but finding the common thread in what you've done and what you want to be doing when you're transitioning will be really helpful for you. There's something there. Of course, there's something there, or else you wouldn't be where you were. Everyone has a story. You just have to figure out how to tell your story in a way that makes sense. And I think, Brian, you also said something to the effect of providing, or how did you say it? I don't know how you said it, but what my thought is, what you can provide to a position, to an employer, have it be about them. Obviously it's about you too, but you always want to, kind of serve it up on a plate and make it easy for them to understand. So make sure if we're talking about a job application, make sure you're filling the job application really fully. I know a lot of people aren't creating cover letters these days. I really love cover letters. And this is a really good opportunity for you to tell that story and to say, listen, I'm in a transition. Here's why, in a much more formal way, of course, but explain it. I think if your resume gets to the recruiter's eyes, they're going to wonder. So why not create a nice narrative to help them understand and to show them how amazing and intelligent you are that you've made this move. I'll pass it to our next panel.
Thank you, Beth. Ed, what would you like to add?
I think some really good points have been made so far, specifically in regards to the cover letter. So this reminds me, prior to working in HR, I did have more of a administrative role over at a health company, but I really wanted to pursue a career in HR. So I found that just applying to jobs wasn't enough. I really had to go do the extra effort, provide that cover letter just to really highlight some of the skills that are transferable and relatable to the role. Of course, just taking some time to really look at that job description, figuring out, okay, what skill sets can I highlight? Okay, I'm missing this experience. Well, maybe I don't have it from this job, but did I do an internship or any other role or anything else where I could use those skills I got from there to pair with my current role, to highlight it in the cover letter. And then, of course, you want to bring it up during the interview. I also bring it up again during the thank you email that you do send after the interview. You really want to highlight not necessarily why you may be the best candidate, but what you have to offer to the company. And it's also another opportunity if it's a role or area you're transitioning into, to highlight once again what's those skill sets that you're bringing.
Thank you. That's a great point. And I think that you've done a good job to give me a nice, easy segue for this one. One of the questions that I wanted to ask was about cover letters. I have to be honest, occasionally, I'll hear from an employer partner or someone from industry that they don't need to see a cover letter. But I have always suggested that a cover letter could really make or break your chances in some ways. So Beth, I'm looking at you. Can you share a little bit more about what kinds of things you would like to see in a cover letter, whether it's from a career changer or from someone applying for a specific job that you're seeking candidates?
So few people actually send me cover letters. And I do a lot of recruiting as part of the work that I do. And I would say maybe 1%, maybe not even 1% of people send a cover letter now. And I think it's dropped really dramatically. It's different for different kinds of roles. I think roles that require writing, I see more cover letters. But even when they do, and even when I request it, we say, we will not review your application unless you send a resume and a cover letter. People still don't send them. So of course we review resumes without cover letters as well. But I think for a cover letter, you really can keep it very simple. Don't sweat it. I used to stress so much over writing cover letters. I hated it. I remember. I still don't love it. But you just keep it very simple. An introduction. I found your listing on Indeed or whatever it is. In your second paragraph, talk about your biggest achievements, your biggest strengths, whatever it is. Maybe in the opening paragraph, you're also talking about why you're transitioning into a different field. And then in conclusion, I would really love to speak more. You can reach me. My contact information is below, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be more than that. You could get really flowery with it and tell a story, and that's nice. But I would keep it really straightforward because there's always a chance that somebody is going to think you are a little over the top, which, hey, if you are over the top, you should be over the top and share it and be yourself, because you want to find a role that's right for you, not just something that's right for the employer, right? But it doesn't have to be anything groundbreaking. It doesn't have to be a work of art. It's just a basic introduction. But I think if you do it, your chances improve, especially, like I said, if it is a job that requires you to have any kind of writing skills, because there's an example of your writing skills.
Thank you for sharing that. It makes a lot of sense. Ed, what do you think about cover letters? I know you were most recently working in sort of the advertising space and recruitment.
Yes.
What's the story with cover letters in those types of industries?
Honestly, I'm 50-50 on it just based on my experience. So I've been in TA for about 5 years or so. I have seen no more than 9 cover letters, I want to say. Like there's not a lot of people doing it. And the few that I have seen, that I've taken the time to read, I found some mistakes in there. Maybe they forgot to change the name of the company. Then the role or the title might have been wrong. I'm definitely in agreement that cover letters are very helpful and can really give you that opportunity to kind of just express yourself and highlight your skill sets. But if you're going to do it, you definitely want to make sure that the proper information is there. And I will also just really be careful with all the details on a cover letter.
So it sounds like you're saying if you're going to make the effort to do a cover letter, it better be good.
Yes,
and you want to
definitely.
make sure that they're paying close attention to detail and taking the time to really make them targeted and specific.
Yes, as well as just doing some research on the company and really finding out why you're applying to this role.
Yep. And one of the things that I like to suggest to candidates is that if you think of, sort of your cover letter is your quick ad for your resume, and then your resume is your longer ad for what you can offer the employer, sort of make sure that all of those things are tied together nicely. Brian, what would you like to add as far as cover letters go?
So you helped me with mine.
Okay.
No, I find it, so I mean, it's somewhat to do with what you were saying, Shannon. But I liked it in the fact that you can list off stuff on your resume, you can put through different things. And I'm sure we'll talk about resumes later. But on your cover letter, it gives you an opportunity to maybe explain a little bit more as to what you were saying in certain parts of the interview and really key in on what you want them to see. So for business and stuff like that, it's an opportunity to put a few more metrics in and maybe give a sentence of two of how you were able to do that. But like Beth said, the more you write, the more you're going to get yourself in trouble. So just be ready to explain anything you write on your cover letter during your interview if you're going to turn one in, because I guarantee you that's probably one of the last things that they'll read before they get like in front of you. And you need to be able to explain it. Don't over embellish anything because you can get yourself in trouble.
That's a great point, Brian. One of the things that I worked within staffing for about a year and a half, not too long, but one of the things that we used to do in our meetings and when we were really looking and screening candidates is if they had a cover letter and a resume, we would read the resume to see if they met what we thought were the basic qualifications. And then we would look at the cover letter next to see how they articulated those qualifications outside of the resume. So I think it sometimes can be important. So we will go ahead at this point and move into resumes. I'd like to start out with, let me go to Ed first. Give me like 2 or 3 of your biggest, I guess, pet peeves or some of the no-nos that you have on resumes.
So at least based off my experience working in marketing, right, resumes tend to differ. Definitely want to be aware of the roles you're applying to and the landscape. The reason I say that is because say you're going for a creative role, the resume could be super simple, but it should also include a link to a portfolio. But if you're doing more of a corporate role, just white background, black letters, make sure the font isn't too difficult to read, make sure it's spaced out appropriately. Me personally, I say no more than 2 pages. But if you're going to go for that third or any more, then the information has to be relevant, right? So if you have over maybe 10 years of recruitment experience working with all these different clients and these different companies, it'll be pretty difficult to condense it over the 2 pages. So you are allowed to go a little bit more, but you shouldn't be going back to roles that may not be relevant or any type of like sales role you had in high school if it doesn't apply for the current job you're applying for.
Thank you. I think those are all good points. Brian, what would you like to add?
I agree with Ed where it should be no more than 2 pages. Honestly, you should be able to get all your relevant information in there, as well as referrals and anything else like that. A big thing that I worked on, again, with Shannon, was how to structure mine, because I had a lot of skills that didn't necessarily line up with banking per se, but it did. In another way as well. It's just when you list it off by, I was at this company, I did this, 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 and this. And then, before that, I was with this company, I did this, 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 and this. What I found mine was as my jobs got more complex and a little bit more difficult and had more to do, it started reading the wrong way, where I didn't do too much and then I did a bunch more and then I did a ton over on this job or whatever. And then they start basing things on how many years were you actually doing that and stuff like that. So I broke down, for resumes and stuff like that. Sometimes it's great to break it down into themes. Like my resume was management was one of my themes, sales and client relationships was one of mine, and then leadership was one of mine. And I was able to speak to each of those. But then following which I gave where I worked and how many years of experience that I had there in order to acquire those skills. And I did try to make sure that it was related to what I was going for. But I was able to do all of that within, the 2-page setup, not really small font, not extending out margins, not any of those little tricks that you do. It's just being succinct, being specific about what you're talking about, and not using superfluous words to try to make things sound pretty.
That's a good point. What do you think, Beth? Are there any tips that you have sort of specifically for what you like to see on resumes or what you don't like to see on resumes?
Sure. Yeah, I really like what Ed and Brian have said. One of the things that I'll share as somebody who reads a lot of resumes is that I like to read them from the bottom up. Obviously, I'll look at it first and see what's at the top of the page, but I really like, I mean, maybe you all know this already, but I'm big on the story of a person. So I like to look at the beginning and see where they wound up. And because of that, you know, maybe other people kind of glance at a resume really quickly and they just see, you know, they take it all in one go. But I like to look and read. Because of that, I think the readability is actually really important. So the more white space you have on the page is helpful. So Brian, what you were saying about kind of like condensing or trying to shrink your margins or something. I can't remember what you said. I've done that as somebody trying to fit a lot in on my resume. And then I realized that wasn't such a great idea. You really want to make it succinct. Really, you're going to have a lot of functions at your many jobs. Put your most important functions at the top and try and keep it succinct for each role, because you're probably have the challenge of keeping your resume to a page or two. And I actually would say if you have less than 5 years experience, try and keep your resume to 1 page. And if you have to go to 2, okay, go to 2, but you probably won't have a lot of time in front of someone's eyes. So just think of it that way. If somebody's going to look at your resume for 20 seconds to a minute, what do you want them to see? Bold things, move things in, indent things, keep it really consistent and readable. Think about the real estate that each job takes up on the page. If you are looking for a job in education, Shannon, we connected through a colleague of mine at Read Alliance. They said it was okay if I mentioned that. They're an amazing nonprofit in the city. They're in the education space. If you're looking for a job there and you're transitioning from, I don't know, construction or something, but you have other work you've done as a volunteer, for example, in education. I don't know, that's maybe a very unique background. I don't know if anybody's in that space, but if you do, try and take up some space with that education volunteer job. It still is valid, even though it's a volunteer job. So just think about it. If somebody was really looking at your resume at a glance, what would they see? And try and highlight the stuff you want them to see.
Just to add on a little bit more to Beth's example, I also think it's very important, specifically if you are transitioning careers or applying to a new role, you do want to spend some time looking at the job description, and you want to make sure your experience and the skill sets are also highlighted in your resume as well. So if the job description is asking for experience with team management, you want to mention that in your resume. It's like, hey, I managed a team at my previous position. But of course you want to word it more professionally, but you really want to make sure that the skill sets is almost mirrored. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it should be mirroring.
And one final thing on this, and this is something that Shannon really helped me with, is to focus on accomplishments, not tasks. I think that was something that really got to me. Is like, well, I can list all the tasks in the world that I did on these jobs, but what did I actually accomplish while I was in that position? That's tangible. It could be intangible as well, but something that you can truly relay that if I was not there, this wouldn't have happened, or wouldn't have happened at least, you know, or I made sure it happened while I was there before I moved on to a different part of life, I guess.
That's a very important point, Brian. Thank you, all 3 of you. If anyone attending this evening has attended the resume webinars that Kelsey Richardson from my team, that the 2 of us offer, these are some of the things that we talk about in those webinars. So it's really nice to hear it from those of you who are out there sort of on the front line, so to speak, with recruitment and talent and working in the space. This is a pretty good segue, Brian, what you were mentioning about focusing on your accomplishments and how you've made an impact and a difference. I think I'm going to move into some questions on interviews, which I think we could probably talk for a couple of hours just on job interviews, but we'll try to keep it somewhat brief. I'm going to go ahead. Let me see. Let me start with Beth on this one. We just went over some do's and don'ts with resumes. We were talking about accomplishments and those kinds of things. So I guess, Beth, why don't you talk a little bit about how, what's a typical interview with you like? This is not necessarily a question that I gave in advance, but I feel like it might be really useful for our attendees to sort of hear what it might be like if they're interviewing with you.
It's a good question. So when I interview, I'm HR, right? So I'm not a subject matter expert. I'm often the first person interviewing a candidate, and I really want to get to the heart of what motivates you, how aligned you are. I do nonprofit work, of course. So a lot of what we look for when we hire people is, are they mission driven? Like, do they align with the work that we're doing? Because as some of you might know, not a lot of people go to work for a nonprofit for the paycheck. It's very much, you have to have a heart for the work that you're doing, or else it's hard to be there. The work is tough and important, but it's also very meaningful. But if you don't find meaning in that work, you probably won't stick around. So, and this is common, not just for nonprofits, of course. But so when I interview people, I really want to understand what drives them. So I'll ask them some very, general interview questions. My interviews, I think on some levels might not be seen as very difficult, but I'm really trying to absorb every little thing. And even before the interview starts, you've started the interview process. I reach out to ask you for the interview. How quickly are you responding? Are you responding in a really professional manner, or do you kind of just respond with like a 2-word answer? Those are maybe not the best ways to respond. I've seen everything, but I think it's really, really telling, and it's really interesting. And so just be really present and be honest. Honestly, if you come in and you bring your best self, you lead with positivity, you show that you're eager, really bring a good attitude, that's what I am hoping to see. That's what I'm trying to get at through all of my I think I have a pretty good set of interview questions, but they're really not anything earth-shattering, because I just want to see how a person shows up. And I don't tell, I tell the candidate a couple of things about the organization in the very beginning, and then we have and I let them know there's time for your questions at the end. And I always leave room for questions, because I think that's really important as a feedback mechanism for me to know what a person is curious about. What is the organization, what speaks to them about the organization. But, and I forgot my train of thought here now, but I say nothing about the organization until the very end, because I want the candidate to tell me something. And I do ask at a certain point, what do you know about us? No, I shouldn't say no one. Really good candidates will know something about the organization. It's a really good idea to do it, like a minute's worth of, just a minute, look at the website, read their about page. I mean, that is one of the things that sells me on a candidate. It's so simple, but it's surprising how many people don't do it.
That's a great point. It's one of the things that when I'm coaching our students or alumni and they're saying how much of a drag it is to write cover letters, I remind them that the research and preparation they're doing to craft that cover letter will be useful down the line should they get a phone call or an email to go in for an interview. They will have already done that homework. So I really appreciate you making that point. Ed, what would you like to add? What's something that maybe you typically would do when you're interviewing a candidate that might be surprising or might be unique to your style?
I think my style is very similar to Bess's. I like to start off by letting the candidate introduce themselves, kind of just give me their elevator speech, let me know about their experience. Then I will usually follow up with some information about the company or the role. And then the things that I'm really looking for when I speak to a candidate is how personable they are, if their personality is coming through, if we're connecting, just because I'm not just hiring somebody that can fill this job. I want to make sure this person is going to be a good fit for the team. So the more personality I am able to get, along with the skill set, of course, that's something that really makes candidates kind of just stand out a little bit more than from the others. Trying to think what else. I definitely agree doing some research as well, coming prepared, having questions. Me personally, I do take the time to kind of just look at the website. I also take it a step further. I like to look, I feel like almost every company now has Instagram. So I just go on their Instagram, see what they're kind of just been up to, whether it's Instagram or Twitter. I've gotten some questions off of there. It's like, I really like some of the work you've done at this event that I saw that the company held, or just something related what you kind of just bring into the conversation to let the recruiter know that you've done your research. And of course, just preparing by getting to know, doing some information on the recruiter as well, whether it's taking time to look at their LinkedIn, finding out, you never know. Like one time I interviewed a candidate, and it turns out that we're an alumni. We discussed how our experience from the school, anything you could really use to kind of just bond with the recruiter, right? Kind of will give you just a little bit of an edge, because now it's like, you know what, I like this person. They were also went to my school. Maybe I could vouch for them a little bit more when I present them to the hiring managers. So definitely want to show your personality. It's okay to be a little bit nervous. And my final tip is just make yourself as comfortable as possible. To my knowledge, and I'm not sure what the current state is, I believe most interviews, or at least phone screens, are still remote. So you want to make sure the environment that you are having a conversation is to help you relax, make you as comfortable as possible. Being nervous is definitely something that's going to happen and is natural. But if you really work on making sure that environment that you're in just helps you out just a little bit more, I definitely recommend it.
I really appreciate what you just said there, Ed, about making sure that the environment around you is quiet and comfortable and distraction free. One of the things that I think makes a big difference, especially because so many things are still done remotely, is, you know, simply taking the time to practice and sort of listening to yourself and getting comfortable in these little boxes on the screen like this. I think that's a really good point, that still so much of the interview process is done remotely. Brian, what would you like to add, having gone through the interview process yourself somewhat recently? What's something that was surprising to you, or did you have something occur during your job search that was that maybe caught you off guard?
Well, first of all, I will concur with both Bess and Ed. Know something about the company that you're interviewing for. Do some research. I have interviewed a lot of people in my time too, in past industry. And it is amazing how many times they're just like, yeah, I'm here for an interview. It's like, okay, can you tell us a little bit about our company? And they're just like, well, I haven't really looked into it. I'm just like, I would look at them and be like, well, we're going to continue with this interview just because I set aside time for it. But I can't believe you walked in here without knowing anything about the business. But I did write down something, and I'm just going to read it verbatim. And then it's pretty much how I feel about interviews. First of all, eye contact, make eye contact, even over, video and stuff like that. They can tell if your eyes are wandering or whatever it is. Are you engaged? Are you not engaged? Use proper verbiage. That takes practice, but also, again, get to know how they speak, their tone and stuff like that when you're doing your research. Be honest about what you do not know, but how you take on challenges and are proactive when learning. It's okay to say, I don't know this, but this is how I take on challenges and put myself in uncomfortable positions. And then make your answers sound and feel natural, which takes preparation, like the two other panelists here says. But it's hard to get a feel for personality when the answers seem robotic and rehearsed. So it's less of a, when they ask me this, I'm going to answer this. It's a, okay, I've gone over all the answers, all sorts of things. And it's kind of like right now, Shannon gave us prepared questions, but really it's about being present in the moment. And really being able to engage with that other person, because you may only get 30 minutes and then find out they were the VP of this region and all sorts of different things. You had 30 minutes with them. Did you do it or not? Did you impress them or not? And people just want to know that even if you don't have the skill, this is how I approach things that I'm challenged with or I want to learn. And they really do appreciate that from what I've learned with my interviews.
Excellent point. Thank you, Brian. I'm seeing that we've got a couple of questions coming in, but I did want to go and just maybe ask each of you one thing that's related to networking, because I think that when you're talking about job search, you can't really do that without talking about networking. I know at least one of you has mentioned LinkedIn during this evening. I think it was you, Ed, who mentioned using LinkedIn to research the person that you'll be interviewing with, and certainly the organizations as well. What would you say, Ed, I'll start with you, are maybe your top 2 tips for using LinkedIn effectively, whether it's for job search itself or maybe within your career for business development or branding?
When it comes to LinkedIn, I think it's important to just honestly, it's a perfect example. A while ago, I was interested in pursuing an opportunity over at Nike, but I didn't have any connections to anybody in the company. So I went to the company's website or the company's page on LinkedIn, used the toolbar to looked up people within talent or into industrial organizational psychology specifically. And I did end up finding one guy who I was like, okay, maybe I could reach out to him. But he was super senior. I think he was like the global director or something like that. And I just sent him a message saying, hey, I graduated with my master in industrial organizational psychology. I'm looking to network with like-minded folks. Do you have 30 minutes to connect? And my friends were like, you can't just reach out to this global person. Like they're super senior. And then the person ended up getting back to me. He was like, yeah, we could talk. And my friends were like, how did you do that? And I was kind of just like, that's the purpose of LinkedIn. You shouldn't be worried about anybody's titles. You should just be reaching out to anybody that you do want to connect with, whether they're in your industry, whether they have a specific skill set that you do want to learn. I have friends of mine who aren't in my industry per se. They're more, it's like, for example, one of them is a media planner, so she's on Excel all day. But I do like to network with them just because they do have the Excel experience that I might need. So whenever I have questions regarding Excel, I know who to go to. I also like to do what I call 360 networking. It's just networking with anybody within doesn't matter what their title is. So anybody more senior, anybody more junior is definitely somebody you could really just connect with, especially right now when it seems like the only way to really just get an opportunity is to know somebody in the company. You do want to spend a lot of time networking and getting to know all these different types of people that could vouch for you or put in a referral for you. So anybody could put in a referral, whether they're coordinators or whether it's the SVP.
That's a great point, and that's a great story, Ed. Maybe it was, sometimes I think that the folks who are at that top level, maybe they don't hear from very many people because a lot of people are hesitant because they're at such a high level. So maybe you set yourself apart from other people by doing so. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to kick things over to Brian. Spoiler alert, I know he's had some success with LinkedIn. So let's hear your advice or pointers about LinkedIn, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, for LinkedIn especially, Well, first of all, if you are looking for a job, make sure that people are going to be able to click and see pretty easily what your profile looks like. So again, less is more. If you have some key things you want to have stick out, great, but show that you've, taken the time to make sure people can see those key things. I personally came to a point where I was sending out 25 to 30 resumes, it felt like, a day to different job posting sites and stuff like that, trying to find somewhere in operations, like trying to, get somebody's attention. I was doing cover letters and stuff like that. But then I decided to look internally and see who did I know, who were actual people that I've crossed paths with along the way. And I wrote just a kind of a humble letter of, hey, I'm looking to switch jobs, or I'm looking for a new opportunity. If you know anybody I can get in contact with. It was a little bit more elaborate of a message than that. But what happened was a person I worked with 8 years ago, when I first moved to New York City, who I had a good rapport with her, but she left pretty quickly. I left pretty quickly. She ended up going and getting her master's in compliance in the banking industry, and she went and got a job at Bank of America as a financial center manager. And so she reached out to me and she's like, hey, I don't know if you ever thought about banking. Her suggestion was, hey, go for an assistant manager job. She gave me a little bit more information about it. But then I went to the Bank of America page and I really got into, well, what is their culture like? Is this something I'd want to do? I've never thought about banking before in my life. I'm a tailor, like I do clothing, like that's sort of my thing. But it was, the diversity, the inclusion that they showed, the opportunities to network, the great place to work. Like there were so many different things that captured my attention because she drew me to it. And then she's like, put my name on there. I'll talk to some people for you. And then I turned in my resume. A couple weeks later, I got a call from the initial recruiter. And then, every 2 weeks after that, I had one more interview and I ended up getting the job. And, I found out that the person that helped me with the job, or the referral, had been going around talking to people about me. So before I even got into the company, people heard these stories, and I'd only known her for 4 months, I think, just to be completely transparent. But again, it just, how are you networking with people, but also how are you treating people, in the jobs that you're at? Are you likable? Are you willing to help? Are you willing to do different things? Because people won't put their name behind you if they're afraid of how you'll act in certain situations. And so that person may have read over, saw the opportunity, or was like, you know what, they really stood against management. I'm not sure I want to put myself in that position. And they may not reach out to you. So it's all about networking wherever you're at. But yeah, my LinkedIn, I was fortunate, but also I'd say when you're humble and you're ready to make a change and stuff like that, put some feelers out there as well as contacts, and you'll get something will happen for you.
Thank you for sharing that, Brian. I'm going to turn things over to Beth and take a little bit of a different turn. What are some things, Beth, what are some tips you might be able to share with our attendees about networking and building connections and relationships that is not related to LinkedIn?
Okay, like real world networking.
Yeah.
I remember that. I don't know how much I've done of it since COVID, quite honestly, but we're going to be doing it again, I'm sure. That's very interesting, because in reality, I'm thinking, okay, well, this is all pre-COVID information that I'm about to share. But I also want to say, Brian, I really think what you just said was really important. To stand behind the work that you're doing and do a good job. And that's the best, most powerful tool you have in networking, because if you're not, doing a great job, people aren't going to want to refer you to a position. But just my perspective on networking, I'm a pretty outgoing person. I talk to as many people as I can when I go to an event. I'm talking about like in-person events, really, but other kinds of online events. Sure, this is networking, what we're doing right now. And I will say something about LinkedIn, because I also am a LinkedIn fan, that I think, I've used it in place of business cards before. Like if I'm at an event and I actually forgot my business cards for a conference once, and I was like really upset about this because, it was going to be very important that I have said business cards at this event. And instead, what I did is I just said, "Oh, are you on LinkedIn?" And I just in the moment would like connect with the person. And it was really, you can write a little note like, it was so great to meet you at this conference. So they don't forget who you are. Maybe you talk to a lot of people, you're at a career event or something. That's great networking. I'm sure CUNY does some like career fairs and things. But I would just say, remember, everyone's human. People get nervous. Everybody gets nervous at networking events. And, just remember, everybody else is human. It doesn't really matter what you talk about. Sometimes you just say the simplest thing about whatever food is there or the lack of food. And then that's the only thing you need to break the ice and have a conversation with someone. And then you're talking about job openings or something. I don't know. But I think the more people even if it's a very casual encounter at an event, and then you connect on LinkedIn, the more people the more opportunity you have for hearing about a position. With LinkedIn, the bigger your network is, obviously people are sharing jobs. So the more jobs that you will see. Yeah. In-person networking, I think we're going to be doing more of it, even throughout the winter. I think it will happen this year. I think we're going to pretend COVID isn't around anymore, and we're going to hopefully be humans with each other in person.
I think those are all good points. I will mention a couple of things. I know we have a fair amount of students attending, and I think something everyone's mentioned, nerves a little bit. One way to sort of network without networking, quote unquote, SPS has I think, growing and active student life community. We've got a lot of student clubs and organizations. Even if they're having sort of meetings or events that are still held virtually via Zoom, that's a really good way to meet new people, connect with others who, there's sort of a built-in network because there are others within SPS or even the CUNY community. And I think sometimes that can be an easy way to get more comfortable talking with people and networking. And even if it's not necessarily you're saying to a person, help me get a job, you're just sort of learning more about them. They're learning about you. So that's just, something that I want to mention. People don't necessarily think about that all the time as being, a way to sort of build your network and connections, but it can be a nice way to do it. That's also low stakes, where it's not as much pressure as if you're going to a big career fair or you're attending an in-person networking event or conference. So that's just something for our attendees to keep in mind.
Sorry,
We've
can I just
got,
quickly add one more thing?
go ahead. Thank you.
When it comes to networking in person, I will also do research on the event itself, maybe finding out who is going. I could be a bit of an introvert sometimes. I have what I would like to call a small social battery. So sometimes I'm not in the mood to go into the crowd and kind of just network with everybody. It could be a little overwhelming for me sometimes. So whether I make a goal, whether it's 3 people or 5 people, was like, okay, I'm going into this event, I'm gonna connect with 3 people or 5 people. I take time to look at the event flyer, maybe find out who's attending, who's hosting, and kind of just work that way. So then it's like, okay, well, these 3 companies are going to be at this career fair. Who might be going? Well, let me make sure to connect with at least these 3 recruiters. So then that's my goal. You really want to find out what kind of just works best for you. And also bringing a friend helps out a lot. Just to somebody to keep you going, kind of keep you company. Maybe divide and conquer as well. So
I like that strategy. Thank you, Ed. That's a great idea. So we did get a couple of questions from our attendees. I'm excited to hear from our attendees. That means you're eager and paying attention. So I'm going to go ahead. Here's something that I think is very thoughtful and important. One of our attendees, Lysandra, thank you, Lysandra, is asking, are there specific strategies that job seekers from underrepresented backgrounds can use to enhance their chances of success? So let me go back to you, Ed, and see if you have any ideas for a fellow SPS person.
Underrepresented backgrounds, what I would say is really take a look at your network. You never really know who somebody knows as well. Once again, just going back to LinkedIn, just definitely doing research, try to find somebody that you might know in the company. Personally speaking, that's something I've been doing. That's definitely something I'm encouraging others to do. So I used to work I was also on a diversity, equity, and belonging board during my time over at Media Brands. And one of the things we focused on was just really kind of just one, networking, and two, building the skill set. Just because the networking is going to get you in the door, the skill set is going to let the company know what you could bring to the table. So in that order, I would really just try to reach out to somebody on LinkedIn that maybe has a similar background, or asking friends if they know somebody within the company, because you never really know who your social network kind of just knows, the social circle knows.
That's a great point. I think it's also important. I think, and actually you said earlier that you want to do that 360 where you're talking and engaging with people who might be more junior or more senior or along the same level that you are. And I think that that's a great point when thinking about, you know, enhancing your chances of success, even if you are in, you know, an area or you have a certain demographic that's underrepresented in an area. Beth, do you have any suggestions or anything to add to this?
Sure, absolutely. And I think that's a really great question. In the work I do with my nonprofit clients, that's sort of specific to what we're focusing on, working with underserved communities, wanting to elevate people's voices, encourage equity. So there are places that what you're talking about is an asset. And I think your perspective is crucial and important, and you find the right partner, employer, however you want to look at it, you find the right place and it will be an asset. So I think, you know, and I think about my career history, and I often was very eager to get a job, we live, I don't know where everyone is here, but I live in New York City. It's expensive in New York City. You need to have a job, right? So I would often, feel a lot of pressure to just get a job, not necessarily the job that was the right one for me. And I think the more care you put into your job search to finding the right people who are going to be a fit for you too, it's not just about you being a fit for them. I think when you go into an interview, ask some good questions about this and how they, what they're doing with DEIB work and what they're doing, how transparent they are with their employees about their policies, things like that. I think that'll serve you well.
Thank you, Beth. We got another question. Find it. Also from Lysandra, thank you. I think this is also a really good question that it's probably not necessarily one that has a clear-cut answer, but I'll go ahead and start with Brian for this one. Given the rapidly changing market, what strategies do you recommend for job seekers to really adapt and stay relevant? I know you've got quite a variety of skill sets and sort of a background in a lot of different areas. So what do you think would be useful for someone to really make sure that they're keeping up to date and current and relevant?
Sure. Well, first of all, leadership is always relevant. So working on leadership skills is always going to be something that will help get you in the right position. But it's stuff that, like Ed was talking about earlier, where it's adaptability and different things like that, that really, truly make you stand out. But if you're interested in something, like, the internet's there for you. There are magazines that specialize in everything. Find out the publications that are the most read and best represented, and just keep up to date yourself. One of the biggest things I can say that I learned is from my dad, who was an electrical and computer engineer for 35 years. He never let anybody pass him up. When there was a new technology or something else that came along, he took it upon himself to go learn it. He watched for the trends. He made sure that he was ahead and was keeping up with everything. So he was never, no one was coming up behind him and catching up to him. He had everything he had and was just adding more onto that platform that he was already solidly kind of standing on. But it all has to do with what industry do you want to be in? What are they coming out with? And like a huge thing I'd say in banking right now is that they're trying to integrate technology with banking. And so it's less of an approach of you come into the bank every time you need something, but it's us teaching you how to be able to use technology so that you can handle your finances and do certain transactions on your own, so that the bank can do different, can target different things. Like, there's certain things that each industry is doing right now, but it's the perfect time for corporate to change things and to try things. It's because we were coming out of the pandemic. Things aren't the same anymore. And there's just huge opportunity for them to do something different. And so just kind of keeping your eyes on who's being successful, who has the largest market shares. If you're looking at business, what are they doing differently? What risks are they taking? Different stuff like that. And just with whatever industry you're in, there's definitely publications and different journals and stuff like that you can be following, that thought leaders are, inputting things every single day there.
That's a great point. Thank you, Brian. Ed, would you like to add something to this?
I think Brian kind of just said everything I was going to say. The only thing I would really add is, along with kind of just doing the research on your industry, is just looking for different opportunities, different experiences, right? So when it comes to like learning, for example, like along with doing the research on magazines, there's also free LinkedIn learning courses that you could kind of just take. You could just add, they have certification, they have the LinkedIn certifications, which you could definitely do. Maybe just publish that when you're done taking a course and let everybody know, hey, I just got the certification in this. It's a great way to, one, promote yourself on LinkedIn, which you should be doing, two, really highlight a skill set, and three, just add something else to your resume. Just so you could kind of just stay aware of what the trends that's happening, keep building that skill set. But yeah, that's
a great point, Ed. And I will mention for our attendees that if you are interested in taking advantage of the LinkedIn Learning portfolio, which I think those programs are fantastic, and they pretty much cover anything you can think of about anything. They are, if you don't have LinkedIn Premium, they are available free of charge, as I understand it. If you have a membership to the New York Public Library, you're able to access the LinkedIn Learning training programs if you have that membership. So that's something, if you don't have LinkedIn Premium and you're interested in taking advantage, I would encourage you to do that, because the membership to the public library is free, which means you can get access to all of that training free as well. Beth, what would you like to add just in terms of making sure that you're keeping your skills fresh and showing that you're adaptable and sort of rolling with the punches with the crazy market as we have now?
So I think what Ed and Brian said, I definitely agree with, for sure. I mean, the more open and willing to learn you are, the better. I mean, it's tricky to always want to keep learning because we get really bogged down with just the day-to-day of life. We get stuck in the weeds. But I think learning is fun and exciting. And I always try to learn new things and challenge myself. I think even doing this is my first time doing a panel. I was a little nervous for this, and it's very fun. But, pushing yourself to try new things that are a bit uncomfortable for you, that's a really great way to keep learning and growing, adapting, and staying relevant. I mean, even if it's not directly related to a job search, it's important to keep pushing your boundaries. What we were talking about with the LinkedIn learning courses, that's great. I didn't know that about the New York Public Library kind of doorway into that. That's fantastic to know about. Thanks for sharing that, Shannon. Also, New York Public Library, I mean, how great of a resource is that just in general for all, you can check out free books, free audiobooks. I mean, you can basically absorb a lot of information just as you're on your commute to work. But there's also, if you wanted to learn some new software and you need to learn Salesforce and you haven't done Salesforce before, you haven't gotten that experience on the job and you need it for a job you're applying for, well, get a free trial, and then there's probably a LinkedIn lesson on that, but there's also YouTube. I mean, I'm sure someone's done a bunch of tutorials on Salesforce. But the other thing I would say that I have found really helpful for me in my career is staying connected to professional organizations. I'm a member of SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, and they're amazing as an organization, and you get on their newsletters and they're keeping you up to date on really big, important news in the world, and they kind of feed it to you, and they make it easy for you to stay on top of things and to stay relevant, but also read the news. I know this probably goes without saying, and it's probably really depressing to think about it right now, because it's hard to want to digest what we have to digest every day, but please don't live under a rock and just know about the world. I think that matters when you go into a job interview, for example, and there's something really big going on, and it's good to know about it and be able to comment on it if you're asked.
I think that's a great point. I also, I think something that sometimes we forget is that, while you're trying to sort of keep your skills fresh and pay attention to what's happening, it's also, good to remember, I think everyone has talked about, we're all human. And when you're conducting a job search and thinking about your career and setting goals and all of those kinds of things, I also think it's important to, reflect on the skill sets that you do have and be confident in the things that you are able to offer. I know, most of our attendees are current students or alumni, and we haven't talked a lot about it, but I think your experience at CUNY SPS and learning and working toward your degree, all of those things are really valuable. And those can be, really translated, to employers and explaining what it is that you offer. And I think just going to school in and of itself is, a clear way to define what you're doing to make sure that you're adaptable and relevant and working on developing skills. So we've got about 15 minutes left. I did want to say thank you to everyone who's sending in questions. If we don't get to them all this evening, I hope that this has still been worthwhile for all of you. I wanted to mention again that, we're excited to hear from our panelists this evening. All three of them have agreed to allow me to encourage you to reach out to them on LinkedIn. I know we've talked a good bit about LinkedIn as a resource, and so I would encourage you, if you have questions, that you're sort of itching to ask our panelists, that might be a really good way to kind of step out of your comfort zone and follow up with someone that you heard from in tonight's event. I will go ahead and sort of move into what I'll call our closing remarks. in our panel this evening. I would love to, and as we were talking earlier, I told each of our panelists that I wanted them to kind of give some closing thoughts to make sure that if there was something that we didn't cover and that they were really kind of hoping to share, that this is an opportunity for them to do that. So I will go ahead and start with Beth. I see the smile on your face. It looks like you've got something you're itching to get out. So why don't you start with our closing remarks?
Okay. I don't know if I was actually just thinking, wow, there's so much to say. But I think, and I actually was smiling because I was thinking, I can't remember if I said this or not, but I'll say it again. And, it doesn't hurt to repeat it if I did say it. I think the most important thing that the most important quality you can have as a candidate, as a person, whatever it is a good attitude. I mean, you can't teach that. You can't learn how, well, I guess maybe you could teach it, but it's not something that an employer is necessarily going to want to teach you. It's you can learn a software program, but you either have the willingness to want to do the work and to kind of try and put a smile on your face, even when things are tough, or you don't, and I think a really good attitude goes a really, really long way, because even if, the work is falling short and you're trying, or, you maybe you're in a transition and you don't have the experience that you need to have for the job, but you want to get there, and you're maybe you did that LinkedIn tutorial and you taught yourself the software, and you can tell them that. I mean, that is an amazing, wonderful sign of a person that they do something like that on their own. They take the initiative. That's really going to impress a lot of people. And I think, I had another good thing that I wanted to say, and I've forgotten it, of course, but I think that's the kind of thing that is going to go really, really far for you. And maybe I'll remember it before we're done. The other thing I wanted to say, but I think that, I know what it was. Every job listing, just talking about like the job application search, every job listing has all these qualifications, all these things you're supposed to have done for this job. It's really, really rare that a candidate has every single piece of those qualifications. So just remember that. It's not like you should rule yourself out. Let the recruiter rule you out. Apply for the jobs that excite you and do your best and just try. You're not going to get the jobs that you don't apply for, you're not going to get them, right? So you might as well give it a shot. You have nothing to lose to send in an application. I think a lot of people get stuck in this like paralysis of like, I don't have the right skills. I can't find any jobs that are right for me. Just see what happens. You really don't have anything to lose.
I like that as a closing thought. Thank you, Beth. Let me move to Ed. What would you like to sort of share here as some of your final advice or ideas?
Just stressing once again the importance of networking. Make sure you want to network with everybody, whether they're coordinators, SVPs, CEOs of the company, if you're able to track them down and kind of just contact them. And if you do contact, if you are fortunate enough to have opportunity to connect with them, do your research on them. Like I said, when I connected with the gentleman from over at Nike, I brought up a question regarding his dissertation he did for his PhD. Maybe you don't need to do it that extreme, but you definitely want to be able to do just, you want to show them you did your homework. Please continue to learn, whether it's LinkedIn Learning or any other source. Just stay on top of everything happening in your industry. Find what works for you. These tips, as great as they all are, some of them might not work for you, but you definitely do want to find out what's best for you. Ask for help. And if you are going to ask for help, make sure it's very specific and precise. Don't just say help. Don't just say I need a job. Ask somebody who's like, okay, how can I how can this person specifically help me? I need feedback on this. Can you help me with mock interviews, etc.? My last one is a big one. I'm not sure if you discussed it, but mentorship is very important to me. You definitely want to connect with somebody more senior in your industry, just so somebody could, one, vouch for you, teach you the ropes, let you know what, kind of provide that roadmap for that career that you really want. Specifically if it's somebody that has the specific title and is working at maybe at the specific company you want to work with, you want to work at. Reach out to them, connect with them. It's like, hey, I really want to do this in 5 years, 10 years from now. What skill sets do I need to learn now? How can I start preparing for this role in the future? So those are my last little tidbits. Thank you for having me as well.
Thank you, Ed. That was a great point about mentoring. And I think, as we've mentioned a couple of times, reaching out to people at all different levels. I think even if you're not necessarily actively seeking a job, that sometimes it can be helpful and worthwhile to, find, even informally, people that you can mentor. I think it's, nice to be able to learn from others in different walks of life and different types of industries and careers. So that was a really good point to bring up mentoring. So thank you. So now I'll move to our third panelist. Brian, do you have anything you'd like to sort of close us out with?
Sure. So my background has a lot to do, I guess, in my career has a lot of work with startups. And startups, you wear a lot of different hats. You have a lot of different opportunities to learn and grow and try new things. And while I was doing that, I was also putting myself through school. So like I didn't have the support of family or anything like that. So I was working my way through school using the stuff I was learning from business programs. And depending on where I was, I always thought of it as my own business sort of thing. And so there are things that you'll learn from teachers that might not work as well for you. There are things that, you may not understand now, but in the future, you may be able to apply them and such. But studies are huge, and making sure that you stand out as a student, and making sure, like for me, I needed to have all A's. I needed to have certain, things, like I couldn't relax if I didn't do, got a perfect grade on whatever it was. But that's not necessarily what the teachers were looking for. They were looking at something like unique or whatever, and then the person that'll reach out to them. And anyways, going through my entire career up to where I'm at right now, I've always worked and gone to school like at the same time, and just like, you know what, I'm going to take these things, I'm going to apply them, and if they blow up in my face, hey, I learned something, and that's great. And then you move on with the next thing. But it's a great opportunity. I mean, schooling was the big thing that just pushed me back into, that was a missing piece I had in my career, was I had not finished school yet. And I did complete at the same time that Ed did last, in December 2022 is when I finally got my bachelor's degree. But in the meantime, I had a lot of real world degrees. I had and licenses and, stuff like that I had built up in the background as well. But never be afraid to try something. Never be afraid to reach out to somebody. At the end of the day, the worst that can happen is they could say no, or one of my professors that I thought would never get back to me was a huge kind of influence and push, and like a great person just to chat to on the side, and they were willing to give me their time. But I can tell you, my girlfriend was the reason I reached out to them, because I was so nervous ahead of time. I was like, this guy teaches at Stern, he does this and that. Just don't be afraid to reach out. Same thing as Ed's saying, same thing as Bess is saying. It's just reach out, talk, network, but also kind of figure out where you want to go along the way. And internships are a great way of kind of learning and seeing if you like the field or not too. So don't ever shy away from an internship opportunity. They're usually short, but you learn a lot those times.
Great points. Thank you, Brian. I like how you kind of ended up talking about going to school and the impact that had on, your recent career success, and sort of, the challenges of going to school and working and trying to find a new career and all of those things. Another thing that I'll sort of close out with is that, you know, as CUNY SPS students and alumni, you have a ton of resources and support available to you. Certainly, here's the shameless plug with, hopefully you can see the plug on the screen, with the workshops and so forth that are coming up over the next couple of months. I also will encourage anyone attending, if you have not worked with the Office of Career Services, please do so. We're here to help you as students and alumni. I hope that this presentation has been worthwhile. I am so grateful to all three of our panelists. I hope that this has been worthwhile. I know I've learned some new things. It's been nice to hear them sort of echo some of the types of advice and ideas and things that I try to share with our students and alumni. I hope that everyone attending this evening has also picked up and learned some new things. I'd like to thank our panelists, of course. I'd also like to thank Nikita Cassidy from my team. She's been sort of behind the scenes running things this evening and always. So thank you, Nikita. And I wish everyone the best of luck with your job search, your networking, and all of those things to come. And with that, we'll close out for the evening. Thank you all.